The Jallianwala Bagh massacre took place on April 13, 1919. While the Baisakhi festival event was taking place, Colonel Reginald Dyer arrived at the Bagh with several armed soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. He closed off all of the exits before he ordered the troops to open fire upon the crowd. Dyer would later state that massacre was to punish the Indians for insubordination. Prior to the massacre, Dyer ordered the crowd to disperse. Numbers vary. Some say there were 379 deaths, while one says there were roughly 1,500 deaths. Madan Malviya stated that there were 42 boys and a baby amongst the dead. Michael Odwyer, the British Lieutenant Governor of Punjab, praised Dyer for maintaining order in India. This statement seemed to earn him the hate of one Udham Singh, the survivor of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Singh later became involved in Indian politics and travelled to Britain in 1934. Singh made plans to assassinate Odwyer, and one day, it happened. On March 13, 1940, when Odwyer was scheduled for a speech, Singh shot him twice. He was later arrested and executed. Side warning: this story has implications of assault. Also using a throwaway account. This isn't my story, but rather my father's revenge on my mom's abusive dad, so some details may be wrong. My parents were born a rural part of Mexico in a small town. An important thing to note is that the area they lived in had a problem with scorpions and the nearest hospital wasn't for a few hours. Life wasn't exactly easy for them. My mom didn't get far in school, having been taken out after 6th grade, while my dad didn't finish 4th grade of elementary school. Life was tough having to find any sort of work to help support the family. My mom grew up with a strict set of parents and her dad was prone to violent outbursts, while her mom was emotionally and sometimes physically abusive. My dad grew up with a single mother. My parents met one night when they were about 15 years old, and from what my mom said they hit off right away. Nothing romantic, but they quickly became great friends. My dad's mom came to view her as somewhat of a daughter and would have her over whenever she had the chance point, but for some reason my dad was never invited to her house. For the next 2 years life for my mom was still really difficult, especially since her father started drinking frequently and her mother became even more distant. There were times where my dad saw something was wrong simply because of how she walked and how she started to flinch with the tiniest touch. She also never had him visit her house and would spend a lot of time at his. Pretty soon they officially started dating. One day my mom's mother simply disappeared with no explanation. This caused her dad to become even more abusive. She endured all of this because try as she might she simply couldn't leave him. Until when she was 18 years old she discovered she was pregnant with me. When she told her dad he smacked her across the face, got his belt and brutally assaulted her and called her all sorts of names. She managed to get out before anything worse happened. She ran to my dad's house where she explained everything to him and how her life had been total hell for such a long time and how she was pregnant. He right then and there he knew he had to get revenge for all the years of abuse she endured. He knew simply turning him wouldn't be enough. He had to make sure he was taken care of for good. My dad knew many people who worked with getting rid of scorpions and which ones would be the most dangerous and lethal. He went looking and found a few with the highest chance of killing someone. The following day he was able to sneak into my mom's house and put the scorpions underneath the abusive dad's bed covers and went home. The following when my mom went to his house, this time with my dad, they found him dead in his bed. She was horrified and shocked. My dad pretended to be shocked too. They got married soon after I was born. They moved to the States after applying and getting accepted for a work visa. He kept this secret for many years, and when he finally told her, she both upset and happy. He was glad she finally told him everything. That night changed both their lives. So I need to keep this somewhat vague to maintain anonymity, and I wasn't there for all of it. This mostly happened to my friend, who was one of the employees screwed over. But I did what I could to help my friend get revenge. Friend of mine was employed as a barista for a coffee shop with a couple of locations. Well, the owner turned out to be a grade A scumbag. Started paying the employees with bad checks, not giving them their tips if they were paid on a credit card. Obviously he couldn't steal their cash tips, not that he didn't try, things along those lines. He was, of course, stealing from the business to fund his own lavish lifestyle. My friend was pissed and quit shortly after this nonsense started, and of course the business shortly went under. But if that's all that happened, this wouldn't fit in pro revenge. Now, my friend was out a few $1,000s. I'm not sure exactly how much, but enough that it was a serious hit to their budget. And they weren't the only one. This creep was the classic con man, writing checks to cover the bad checks, all the delay tactics you ever see. Oh, the bank must have messed up, just redeposit it, and of course it comes back as a bad check a week or two later. Lots of shady stuff. But he was a good con man. All told, 8 people were getting screwed over too, I found out later, in excess of $20k. So one afternoon, my friend is telling me this story. How he's so sick and tired of being conned by this creep, as well as everyone else. And here is where the pro-revenge part begins to come into effect. I start digging into the business owner. All public record stuff, and some of it I learned from my friend, or their coworkers. But started to learn a lot about this scumbag. 1. He's got multiple felonies in his past. I'm all for giving people a second chance, but this guy wasn't that old and had racked up easily a half dozen felonies. Why he wasn't still in jail is a topic for a much different forum. 2. One of his convictions was for being a felon in possession of a firearm. 3. He was currently on probation for the above conviction. This is where things start getting interesting. A little more like digging, and I come up with the name of his probation officer. When I sat and talked to my friend about what I had found out about his prior employer, 2 cycles of bounced checks was enough. He happened to mention that he had seen firearms in his apartment. They'd hung out together socially before things went completely pear-shaped. He'd used his girlfriend to purchase firearms, since he was a prohibited person. Straw purchase, yet another felony. So now as things get really interesting, I put my friend in contact with Scumbag's probation officer. Turns out when you are out on probation, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do. One of them is commit more felonies. This is an automatic revocation of your probation, and will land your happy little butt back in jail. Oh, and knowingly passing bad checks in our state for the amount he was writing them for is a felony in and of itself. 8 employees, 3 payroll cycles, before the business officially went belly up, 23 felony counts of passing a bad check, since my buddy bailed at 2 cycles. Repeat offense of being a felon in possession of a firearm. As if that's not bad enough, when his probation officer came a knocking to check on these allegations, he also found drug paraphernalia and drugs sufficient to get him for possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. Multiple different drugs, so multiple counts of that too. For those keeping score at home, if he was convicted of all of these counts, he would be looking at roughly an additional 30 felonies. Easily enough to keep him in jail for a very long time. Now, if this were petty revenge, that's where things would have stopped. But no. You see, the state has this fund that all employers pay a tax into. It's a fund for those situations where the company goes out of business, writes bad checks for their employees, etc. And it's administered by the state labor board. So they pay out to cover the lost wages, but not the lost tips, of the employees. But the state is not benevolent in this. Oh no. You see, in order to attempt to recoup their losses, they can seize company assets. And in the case of a poorly set up company with no separation of assets between the company and the owner, they can also seize personal assets. Oh yes. That shiny new company truck that you're towing your shiny new boat with, guess what, scumbag? They now belong to the state. Your bank accounts? Yeah, those belong to the state now too. Now surely, you must be thinking, surely this is now pro-revenge, right? Oh no. You see, this scumbag messed with my friend. And I don't take kindly to that kind of nonsense. You see, my friend learned throughout this process that on top of all this, his former employer was committing tax fraud evasion. As far as the employees were concerned, they were all straight up W4 employees, meaning he was withholding the correct taxes, payroll taxes, Medicare taxes, etc. Except he was reporting to the eyes that all of his employees were independent contractors, and wasn't actually withholding any taxes at all. Taxes for the company? He was fudging those so badly they should have been sold as brownies. Unfortunately for scumbag, a friend of a friend happened to work for the local ICE office. and after sitting with him over drinks one evening, found out that the ICE has a tip line for reporting tax evasion. And depending on how it's reported, well, turns out that the person reporting the tax evasion may actually get a small percentage as a reward for turning in the tax cheat. So on top of facing 30 some odd felony charges, on top of having all his personal and company assets seized, scumbag now has the ICE chasing after him. That, dear readers, is pro-revenge. I will update this as more developments come in. I can say that, because this scumbag is such a scumbag, he is currently sitting in jail awaiting trial for domestic assault on his girlfriend. My friend and his co-workers have been interviewed by local police and the probation officer, as well as the ICE and the ATF, for the straw purchases of the firearms through his girlfriend. My understanding is she's made a deal with the ATF to avoid charges for the straw purchases in exchange for her testimony against him. The DA and probation officer are waiting for him to be sentenced on the domestic violence charges before they go after him for all the other stuff. That way he has to serve the sentences consecutively. As far as the federal charges, who knows when those will be filed. But my understanding is that no matter when he's charged, he'll have to serve the federal time after his state prison time and won't get any credit for time served in the state pen. Thank you for watching. Slap that like button and comment your opinion on these stories below. I'm waiting. Write that comment. Seriously. Have you written it yet? If you don't comment, you make a bunny cry somewhere. You're not that kind of person. I know. Anyways, peace out and catch you tomorrow.